Yahoo Fantasy Auto Racing, the Tucson Racing League has completed Week 4. The Jeff Byrd 500 at the Bristol Motor Speedway. Your top 5 following the event. Kyle Busch picks up his victory, sweeping the weekend for the second consecutive weekend at the Bristol Motor Speedway after he won the Nationwide Series race on Saturday. Second was Carl Edwards, third Jimmy Johnson, fourth Matt Kenseth, and fifth Paul Menard. The point standings after 4 of 36 races has Kurt Busch on top. He's the 4th different points leader in 4 races. Carl Edwards trails by 1 point, then a tie for 3rd between teammates Tony Stewart and Ryan Newman. And 5th is the surprising Paul Menard, just 14 points out of 1st. Your race notes from the event. Carl Edwards won the pole for this one with Greg Biffle, his teammate, on the outside pole as Roush Fenway Racing was able to sweep the front row. Goodyear brought a terrible tire to the racetrack. They brought a tire that was coming apart after about 35 to 40 laps on a racetrack where they can usually run over 100 laps without pitting. So Goodyear had to switch the compound and bring a harder tire, and that wound up causing some problems for some of the teams that qualified well, such as Regan Smith out of Yahoo's Group C. Carl Edwards and Paul Menard were leading this event early. Your first yellow of the event was an incident involving Brad Keselowski, David Rudiman, Denny Hamlin, A.J. Allmendinger, and Jamie McMurray. All of these drivers would struggle to be contenders or not be contenders at all for the remainder of the event. They were taken out rather early. Jeff Burton pit under green. That's devastating at the Bristol Motor Speedway because of the size of the racetrack. On lap 76, he fell off the lead lap and was nowhere near contention for the rest of the event. Brian Vickers, same problem. He had to go behind the wall early in the event. He ran many laps down the rest of the day. Kyle Busch reached the lead for the first time on lap 81. He swapped the lead around with David Gilliland, Ryan Newman, and Martin Truex. All of them led laps for quite a bit during the early middle portion of the event. Brad Keselowski spun again, bringing out the 4th yellow of the day. He had a terrible race. Kevin Harvick and Jimmy Johnson found their way to the lead, and they would swap the lead a few times up at the front. Bobby Labonte spun to bring out yellow number 5. He would recover, though, for a top 15 finish out of a surprisingly strongly performing team to start this season 4 races in. Trevor Bayne, the hot name in NASCAR, he slapped the wall on lap 273. He was having a terrible race as it was. He did not bring out a yellow with the incident, but it compounded an already terrible day. Jimmy Johnson and Kyle Busch then established dominance in the event. By lap 300, they already had led at least half the laps and would continue to do so all the way to the finish. Then we were at our 8th yellow of the race when Mark Martin accidentally tagged Kevin Harvick, setting off a chain wreck, which collected Jamie McMurray again, Clint Bowyer, Trevor Bayne again, and Juan Pablo Montoya. All 4 of those drivers wound up being non-factors from there on out. The 10th yellow of the event was Clint Bowyer blowing up. Actually, that happened rather quickly after the 8th yellow of the event. That 10th yellow set up a 3-way dash for cash between Kyle Busch, Carl Edwards, and Jimmy Johnson, as those 3 would run away from the pack and settle things on their own. Joey Logano would tag the wall with 18 laps to go, but that would be a non-factor in the event, and unfortunately ended what was a decent run for Logano, who desperately needs a good run after starting off this season with a bunch of poor finishes. Kyle Busch would wind up driving to a clean but hard victory, holding off Carl Edwards and Jimmy Johnson when all was said and done. So what you're all here for, the Tucson Racing League results. First in the league this week, needing a wedge adjustment with 331 points. Winner Kyle Busch was on the squad for wedge adjustment this week. Also had 2 other drivers in the top 10. That was Paul Menard and Ryan Newman, 5th and 10th respectively. Those 3 drivers made up for Joey Logano's disappointing 23rd. Needing a wedge adjustment also was able to pick up the victory because of a 10-point bonus by having Carl Edwards on the bench. Those pole position bonus points do matter. Why? Because second this week, Vroom Vroom, losing by just 3 points. So that 10-point bonus was enough for the victory for wedge adjustment. Vroom Vroom had 1st place Kyle Busch, 5th place Paul Menard, and 10th place Ryan Newman, just like needing a wedge adjustment did. But Vroom Vroom went with Jamie McMurray for 21st place. That's actually better than the 4 drivers that wedge adjustment started, but Vroom Vroom only had 3 bonus points this week. Those were the 3 points from Regan Smith, so the bonus points were the difference in settling the score. Third this week, Greek Thunder, 321 points, 10 points out of 1st place this week, had no bonus points from their drivers off the bench. So Greek Thunder settled for 4 drivers in the top 12 and still did not manage to win. Greek had Paul Menard in 5th, Kurt Busch in 7th, Ryan Newman in 10th, and Mark Martin in 12th. 4th this week, Pass in the Grass, 307 points. Pass in the Grass, defending champion from last season. This is their first top 5 of the season, finishing 24 points out of first place this week. Had 4 drivers in the top 20. Winner Kyle Busch was on the squad, Paul Menard in 5th, Marcus Ambrose in 15th, and Jeff Burton the disappointing 20th. 5th this week, More Left Turns, 295 points, 36 points out of first this week. Had 3 drivers in the top 10. That was Kurt Busch in 7th, Paul Menard in 5th, and Casey Kane in 9th, but had the disappointing Jamie McMurray in 21st. 6th this week, just missing out on a top 5, Lightning McQueen. 2 drivers in the top 10, Kyle Busch and Casey Kane. 18th, Brad Keselowski, and 29th, Bill Elliott, to finish 67 points out of first place. 7th this week, Here for the Snacks, with 3 drivers in the top 15, picking up 261 points, 70 points out of first. Those 3 drivers in the top 15, Paul Menard, Casey Kane, and Jeff Gordon, who was 14th. But Snacks started A.J. Allmendinger, who finished 31st. That was actually tied for the worst of any driver who was started by anyone in the league this week. 7th, that was 7th. 8th, Paul Mustard, who finishes outside the top 5 for the first time this season. Mustard had just 259 points, finishing 72 points out of first. Starting Tony Stewart in Group A for a disappointing 19th. Paul Menard was 5th, so that was the bright spot on Mustard's squad. But the 2B drivers were Mark Martin in 12th and Juan Pablo Montoya in 24th. 9th this week, Baby Wipes, with just 229 points, 102 points out of first this week. Had 11 bonus points from qualifying with Carl Edwards and Paul Menard, but just 1 driver in the top 12. That was Kurt Busch in 7th. Bobby Labonte came home 13th in Group C for Baby Wipes, and 2 disappointing drivers in Group B, Juan Pablo Montoya in 24th and A.J. Allmendinger in 31st. Finishing out the field this week, 10th place, Pro Race Car Jackman with just 221 points, 110 points out of first place this week. 1 driver in the top 15, that was Paul Menard in 5th, a disappointing 19th out of Tony Stewart in Group A, and then also went with Montoya and Allmendinger for 24th and 31st respectively in Group B. Your overall points in the league going into the 5th race of the season, we see Mustard sitting atop the standings by just 56 points over Greek Thunder. Both teams are off to very successful starts to the season. Then 122 points back is More Left Turns. 4th, Wedge Adjustment, 135 points back. Moving up to 5th this week is Pass in the Grass, 192 back. Falling to 6th this week is Lightning McQueen, 232 points out of first overall. 7th, and jumping up 2 spots this week, Vroom Vroom, 260 points out of first. Pro Race Car Jackman sits 8th, 279 points out of first place. 9th, Baby Wipes, 303 points out. And 10th, Here for the Snacks, 321 points out. But remember, we've still got 32 races to go. So a 320-point deficit from 1st to 10th is still very tight in the long run. So everybody is still very much in this. Next week, Week 5, the Auto Club 400 at the Auto Club Speedway in California. This used to be a 500-mile race held in the 2nd week of the season. They moved it back to Week 5 and shortened it by 100 miles. So you're probably going to see some unexpected events coming from this one as drivers and teams will scramble to try to figure out how to address 100 fewer miles to get things done. Your block of 8 is going to lock Friday at 2 in the morning, and your starters for the race will lock Sunday at noon. So we'll hope to see you back next Monday as we'll recap Week 5 in the Tucson Racing League.